Shall I start?
Wait.
Yep.
So we're now live?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's Devtoberfest session, where we will delve into event-driven architecture with enterprise event enablement in the ABAP Cloud. I'm Tatjana, and joining me today are Jens and Jonas. Our goal for today is to give you a comprehensive understanding of the motivation behind event-driven communication, the standards we use for such use cases, and how this all comes together in the ABAP Cloud-based products. We'll also provide a practical perspective with demonstrations on creating event producers in RAP, configuring them, and creating event consumers for productive use. To kick things off, let's explore the difference between event-based communication . What has happened? Think of event-based communication as a radio broadcast. The broadcaster sends out information without knowing who might be listening. Each listener or receiver has the freedom to use the information in a way that suits them best. On the other hand, something does not work with my presentation. I'm sorry. On the other hand, the point-to-point communication is more rigid, taking place between known partners with a defined contract that's not easily altered. The beauty of events lies in their flexibility, both in terms of communication partner and the type of information to be broadcasted. To bring this to life, let's consider a potential integration scenario using sub-services. At the core, we have the sub-event mesh service instance, acting as an event exchange infrastructure. We can define queues based on our needs, where messages can be stored. We can then connect an S/4HANA Public Cloud Edition, for example, as an event producer with other systems like S/4HANA Private Edition, you see on the bottom, or a third-party cloud application as potential event consumers. For instance, when the S/4HANA Public Cloud Edition tenant emits a business event following the creation of a new business partner, it can trigger follow-up processes in the consuming system. If none of the consumers express interest in this event, it may either disappear or remain in one of the queues. However, in our scenario, the consuming systems express interest in the event type as they are subscribed to it. These processes that can be triggered through the event can be logging the event, triggering an external service partner, or initiating an external business process. So notably, we can adapt this use case by adding communication partners, such as a custom app built on the sub-BTP ABAP environment, or a tenant of an S/4HANA on-premise system. These partners can use various techniques to connect to the sub-event mesh, as you see on the different colors and icons of the arrows. So they can use different techniques like AMQP, REST, or webhooks. However, it's important to note that the sender of the information does not need to concern themselves with these different technical differences. And again, we have the option to send an event out, and the event will trigger different processes depending on the consuming application. It can be used to monitor processes, or it can be used to trigger analytical evaluations. To ensure that all potential receivers understand the business process, it's crucial to utilize standards for the event payload. In this regard, we employ the Cloud Event Standard, which is defined through the CNCF working group, involving collaboration of numerous companies. This helps maintain consistency and clarity across multiple platforms. The Cloud Event Standard provides a set of attributes known as the Cloud Event Context, you see in the upper part of the example. This context allows downstream processing components to correctly route and filter the event. It contains vital information about the event type, for example, that you see in the first line. There you see that it has been created by the SAP S/4 application through the business object type sales order. It contains the source, which allows you to determine where the event came from, where it has been triggered, and which system was initiating this event. And it contains custom context field, sometimes, which allows you to filter and to route the event depending on your needs. And of course, it contains business payload. We distinguish between two main types of business events: activity events and data events. An activity event you see on the left-hand side. It contains a minimal set of data, and it only shows what has happened and where it has happened. Whereas a data event, like you see on the right-hand side, contains the entire changed on new object, eliminating the need for the receiver to request additional data from the sender. So while the standard outlines the structure of the business event, each application identifies different occurrences during the life cycle of a business object as noteworthy and significant. Typically, an event is triggered at a specific point in the life cycle or state change of a business object. To simplify the process for potential receivers, to build event consumers, we utilize a second open standard describing the metadata, which is called Async API. And this has been defined to cater for asynchronous publish-subscribe scenarios. An application using events can specify the event types it's capable of publishing and subscribing to, you see in the middle part, and the respective schema information for each event type that can be specified here. For SAP services, event metadata for approximately 350 objects is readily available on the SAP Business Accelerator Hub. We encourage you to download the Async API files from there if you need to build consumers for your integration use case. Let's look at the integration scenarios that are possible with the capabilities of the enterprise event enablement in the ABAP Cloud. You might have already used the SAP Event Mesh default plan, which you see in the middle of the picture. This allows you to set up integrations between S/4HANA public cloud systems or applications developed on SAP BTP ABAP environment tenants to exchange SAP and customer events. In addition to this, we will add a highly automated integration with the SAP Event Broker, which allows to build integrations between SAP applications. And if you need integrations for high volume scenarios, you will be able to use the Advanced Event Mesh Service Plan soon for on-premise and for S/4HANA Public Cloud Edition systems, so that you can develop integration scenarios at your needs using SAP and customer event types. So let's look at our scenario that we would like to show you live. Today we will use an SAP BTP ABAP environment tenant to build an event producer in RAP, and we will demonstrate how to configure that event producer to be visible to the outside, how to configure the connection with the sub-event mesh. And in the second step, we will also show you how to consume the same event. But let's start with the first steps. Jens and Jonas will show you what to do in the role of the developer and administrator for a new RAP event. And with that, I would hand over to Jonas and Jens.
Thanks, Tatjana. I will start sharing. Okay. So I'm in the role of the developer now, and my task is to implement a new event in this sub-BTP ABAP environment system for this demo flight app, you may know. Okay, so to be more specific, if I click here on the travel agency, loads, and you can see here the bookings. And my task is now, whenever a new booking is created, that corresponding event should be raised. Okay. For that, I have to switch to the ADT, and I show you how to do this using RAP. Okay, so what you can see here is the behavior definition for this demo flight app. And you already can see here that there's an event already defined, booking deleted. But if I comment this in this line, you can see that we now want to define a new event using the keyword event and call it booking created. And there's also the additional keyword parameter, which means that here with this abstract entity, you can model the actual event payload. So you open this abstract entity, and you can see this is I already defined in advance. So there's the UUID, also customer ID, airline ID, flight price, and so on. Okay. So now we have defined the event and also the event payload. And in the next step, we have to specify the raising location. So for that, I open the behavior implementation class for this behavior definition. And you can see here, what I want to do is to redefine the save modified method in the sense that first we check if it's really a new booking. So if create booking is not initial, because for example, if it's a changed event, we don't want to raise a booking created event. So if this is not initial, we can use here raise entity event for our previously defined booking created event in the behavior definition. And here in the next line, I just copy the data from the booking entity here to the payload of the event, which I showed you before. Okay, so now we have defined the event payload, and the raising location. And the last part, what we have to do is we have to make this event publicly known to the front end. Okay, for that, I create a new event binding. Or let's do October first. And here you can see that I have to fill in some fields. First, the type namespace for the demo flight. So this is the first part of the event type then later. Then the sub object type, which I created already in advance. And then the operation, which is of course created. Then I have to add here my event. So I have to specify my behavior definition where I've implemented the event. Then I can use here browse and I get a list of all the available events there. I want to have the booking created. I add this, save it. And then you can see here that the event type is generated. So as I said before, the first part is the type namespace, then the sub-object type, operation, and then also versioning. And now I will hand over to Jens, who will show you how to configure an event channel producing this kind of events.
Okay, so also a warm welcome from my side. I will be your administrator today, and I will show you how to configure the event now. So before we can start to send out events, what we need is obviously an active connection between our S4 system and the event mesh. And what I've done before, and as you all might know, maybe in the cloud context, what we need for outbound connections is a communication arrangement. And there is this scenario from us. It's a subcom 0092 scenario, and this then connects your S4 system to the to the event. And here you can see I already created 2 of those, one for produce and one for consume. We will focus on the produce side right now. Okay, so I've created this beforehand, and now we want to configure this connection. Because as Tatjana mentioned before, we have 350 events available in sub S4. So if we would now just start to send out all the events, we know this would create a massive overhead, and you might only be interested in sales order created, or as Jonas just implemented, the booking created event. So there is this app, configure channel bindings from the enterprise event enablement. And if we go in here, you can see here these 2 channels, the connections, and I will choose the Devtober produce case. And you can see here we have outbound topics, inbound topics, and subscriptions. And the outbound topics are basically allow listing which events should be raised. And if I press here on create, and I can now choose the topic. And what you can see here, there is already demo subflight DMO booking created B1 event. And if I choose this and press create, we have now created a new outbound event. And this concludes the configuration. Now, every time someone goes into the app Jonas showed you before and creates a new booking event will be raised and sent out to the corresponding event. And with that, I will hand back over to Tatjana.
So you want to share the admin?
Yes, exactly. So exactly. Sorry. What we need for the next step, of course, for the consume part, as Tatjana already mentioned, the event metadata are stored in the Async API, and we can find it down here. So you can just copy and paste it here, because this we will need to create the consumer, as it contains also information about the data type. For example, flight price is a number, and travel UUID would be a string, for example. And this metadata is needed to create the event consumption model. You can find it in this app here for your outbound bindings that you have configured here, or you can find this on the Business Accelerator app. And with that, I will now hand back to Tatjana.
Okay, then let's continue. Jens and Jonas have shown us what to do to develop a new event. Now we would like to consume this event and react to it according to our business use case. So therefore, we again need a connection from the event mesh to our BTP ABAP environment tenant. And we have to prepare the consumer in a way that it accepts the event and that it processes the event in the right user context. So let's see what we need to do. Jens mentioned that the metadata can be found on the event provider application, which he has shown us, or on the Business Accelerator Hub. So we need to download the event specification from there. And then we have to go into our development system and use a wizard, which we have prepared for that use case. This wizard imports the specification as it is in a file. And once you complete the UI, once you provide all the necessary parameters in the UI, you will see that the event consumption model is being created for you automatically. It contains a lot of artifacts that you need or that we need to consume the event. First of all, we need, of course, some business logic that does something with the payload of the event. And as we want to make sure that the event is processed in the right user context, we need some authorization values. So please, in case you provide authorization checks in the code that you include into the event handler, they need to be part of the authorization default values. Later on, they will be used for the respective role. As we are in the cloud context, we also need to expose the consumption model somehow. And this is, in this case, we do it via an inbound service. This inbound service is already created with the consumption model. And in the process later on, you can include that in the respective communication scenario. Once you have done these implementation and accomplished the authorization default values according to the business logic, you would be able to transport the communication scenario to the productive system where you would need to configure that. So now we see an example integration scenario here. We have two BTP ABAP environment tenants communicating with each other. One is emitting the event. Here we need the connection configured through the subcom 92 communication scenario. And we have already allowed listed the necessary event types that we want the system to emit. Once this is done, we have to go to the consuming system, and we also need a connection here. We use the same communication scenario to set up the connection. And as we have already developed the communication scenario for our consumer, we simply create a communication arrangement. In the background, the user that is being assigned to this communication arrangement and system will be assigned the specific role that you have provided in the development step. And with that, at runtime, it's ensured that the processing of this specific event type is always in the context of this role and the user. And as the last step, someone needs to trigger the event. It's typically the business user. And once this is done, the event can be transported from the production system to the consuming system and finally processed through the event consumption model that you have defined. And with that, I would like to hand back to Jonas and Jens to show us how to do that in the system.
Yeah, thanks, Tatjana. I will show you. Okay. Again, I'm in the role of a developer, but this time my task is to implement the event consumption, so to generate an event consumer. Yeah, it's the same system, but it has nothing to do with the previous flight demo app. So, okay, so as I said, I have to create an event consumption model. And I have to fill in this description. And here's the name of the event consumption model. So the first segment is the namespace of the package. Then I can specify a prefix if I want, it's optional. And all the generated artifacts later will have the same prefix. And then I have here my name of the event consumption model. Okay, so the most important part now is here, the event specification file. And this is the async API file that Tatjana talked about and also Jens showed you. And I already downloaded it from the configuration app beforehand. So I upload it here and click on next. And what you can see here is now the async API file is parsed, and every event type that is contained in the file is listed here. Since it's only the booking created event, it's only the one single event. And then we have here some name proposals for the generated artifacts. For example, here, this entity name describes the payload then. So it's just a proposal. You can keep it or you can change it. And on the next page, there are again proposals for the classes. So here's the consumer class is used to implement the event handling logic you want. Again, they're just proposals, but also change them. Okay, so before we generate the artifacts, there's also an overview about all the generated artifacts. So first the event consumption model, then this inbound service that is required here in this cloud context, as Tatjana already explained. And we will need this later for the communication scenario. Then you can see also authorization default values. For example, if you have some authority checks later in your custom code for the event handling, then you can add them here so that they are automatically generated for the user role later. Okay, and all the rest I already explained briefly. Okay, then I have my transport. And yeah, this will take a few seconds now. And what I will show you next is first the generated artifacts. And then I will implement the custom event handling logic. We will just update booking statistics. So whenever a new booking created event is received, then we will check for which airline this booking was created, and then we will update the booking statistic by one for the given airline. So just a few more seconds. Okay, perfect. So here you can see the event consumption model that has been generated. And here below, you can see all the supported event types for the given event consumption model. And here you can also find our booking curated event type. Here under entity name, there is the abstract entity that represents the payload. And if you double click on it, it will open. And if you compare this to the abstract entity here that I used for the outgoing event, you see that it has the same fields, of course, but here the types are a bit different because here we use specific ABAP types and also some annotations, but the event is, or the properties here are converted to more generic JSON types in the async API file, so that when we use it here for generating the ABAP types, they are also a bit more generic, but you can always change them afterwards and also add annotations if you want. Okay, So the last part now, what we have to do is here you find the consumer class, and by clicking on it, it will open. And here you have to implement the custom event handling logic. So there's also some pre-generated code, but I replace it with my code here. And what you can see, this is the handling method for booking created. And there's an importing parameter, the event. And with this event object, you can get more or less every relevant event property, like the event ID, the source or its origin, the timestamp, type, and so on. And of course, also the business data. So we need only the airline ID here in this use case. And yeah, good. Then in the next step, I just check if the airline ID equals American Airlines. And if this is the case, I will raise an exception with not supported. This has no real business logic, but it should show you later what happens if an event raises an exception that is not caught here in the handling logic. If it's a different airline, then as I said before, we just update the booking statistic and increase the counter by 1 for the given airline. Okay. So cool thing is, we have generated all the artifacts, but you also want to test maybe your coding here, if it does what you expect. So you can set here a breakpoint, go back to your event consumption model. And here you can find the button. It's called Simulate Consumption. And by clicking on it, opens the event payload with dummy values based on the ABAP types. And since we only need the airline ID, I changed it here to American Airlines. So you can change every field here if you want. And click on OK. The event is triggered, and now the debugger should open. Yes. A few seconds. Okay, so here I am in the debugger, and I see that the airline ID is now American Airlines, so it will raise an exception here. Oh, perfect, as expected. Okay, now we have defined the event and also implemented the custom event logic. And the last step now is that we need to create a communication scenario for this event consumption model so that it's publicly known to the front end. And therefore I create a communication scenario. And the important part here now is the inbound tab. So I switch it to the inbound tab. And here I have to add now the inbound service of the previously generated event consumption model. So here is our event consumption model. You can expand the tree here, and it shows all the corresponding artifacts that have been generated. And you can also see here the inbound service. So what we have to do now is we click here on Add. And finish, save this, and also publish it locally so that we can use it here in the system for testing, and so that it's available for Jens, who will now show you what's the required steps to assign this event consumption model to his event channel. And with that, I hand over to Jens.
All right, thank you. So again, I will be the administrator, and as I've shown you before, we created two connections, one for the consume case and one for the produce case. How to do it for the produce case, I've already shown you. And now what I'm going to do is configure this consume channel we created. And as Jonas and Tatjana already mentioned, once an event comes into the system, we hand it over to this custom business logic. And of course, it then has to run under a specific user with a specific authorization. And to guarantee this, we have to create a new communication arrangement based off of the communication scenario our developer has just created. So I'll open this communication arrangement tab and create a new one. And we should see here now, if I search for BNO, there it is, the Devtoberfest communication scenario. And I will keep it as the arrangement name as that, DMO Devtoberfest, just to make it easier for us. What I now need is a new communication system. I'll just press on this new button and I'll call it Devtoberfest system. And I'll create it. We are now forwarded to this creation screen of the communication system. As we are only staying inside of our own system, so we're just doing basically a user switch, we can check this on inbound only. And now there is this option with the event mesh down here, and we toggle it on, and we can now add here our event channel, and you can see here both of our channels. In this case, of course, I want to use the consume channel, so I choose Devtober consume. Now I also have to assign a new user to this, and I also prepared one. And this Devtober consumer user will then get this authorization default values you specified while developing your event consumption. Press OK, and this is it for the communication system. I'll press save. This will forward me back to the communication arrangement. And you can see here the communication system is now valid, and I'll add my inbound user in here, and I'll hit save. And now we already made a connection between the Devtober consume channel, so the connection to the event mesh, and our event consumption model. So if I go back and go into this channel binding app, we can now choose the Devtober consume channel. And you can see here, we already created this inbound binding, which is this demo stop flight booking created event type. And you can also navigate inward, and you can see here, there it is, our consumer, set Devtoberfest consumer. So that's all fine, but now we still cannot consume events because we are not subscribed to a queue on the sub-event mesh. And for that, we have to add a new subscription in here. So I'll press the create button, and I will just copy and paste this. I created this beforehand. It's just a demo flight. That's the name of the queue on the event mesh, and I will press create. And if I navigate backwards, we can see it's acknowledged. This means this queue exists on the other side. If you, for example, would now type in a queue that does not exist, this would be rejected. And now we are all finished with the configuration. This means our Devtober produce channel is now used to send out the booking created events, and our consume event, Devtober consume channel, would then consume them off of this queue. So let's head back. And now all of these events are, of course, happening in the background. And as an administrator, I want to have a way to monitor which events get sent out, were there events that have failed, and basically monitoring tools. So for that, to show you these capabilities, I will move back to this travel app Jonas showed you before, and I just choose one of these travels, navigate inward, and create a new booking for this travel. All right. Take some time. Okay, so you can see there are already some bookings in here, but I want to create a new one because booking created will now raise a business event. All right, create a booking. All right, so airline ID, I will choose this one. So I'll choose now airline ID American Airlines, and the customer ID is maybe Irmtraut, and the booking status is open. If you remember American Airlines in Jonas's business logic, this will raise an exception. So I will hit apply. There's a new object. I'll press save. And this will, of course, create this new booking and then emit a new event. So if I go back in my Fiori Launchpad, and there is another app here I haven't shown you before. It's the Enterprise Event Enablement Event Monitor. So if we go in here, take some time, and you can see here the DevTober produce. So we start at the beginning. Has one processed event, and if we navigate inward, you can see, of course, it's a booking created event in here. Its status is acknowledged, which means we sent it to the event mesh and we got an acknowledgement from the event mesh that this event has been received by the event mesh. And if you navigate forward, you can see all kinds of data that might be of interest. So, for example, you can see the publish time, and you can also see the acknowledge time, which is the same. So the event mesh was fast this time. You can also see, for example, the payload, and you can see here the travel UU ID, booking ID, and of course the airline ID, which would be American Airlines. The flight price was $3,000. So if we, so this is our event here, and if we now go back, you can see this DevTober consume has failed events. Now if we go in, we can see there are two failed events. The first one is probably from Jonas during his simulate consumption, and the second one was me. So if I go in here, you can see it's exactly the same the event. So that's nice. So what can I do now? Let's say there was some error here. There is the option to reset your failed events here, and this will put them back in process. And if Jonas, for example, would now comment this line out that an exception should be raised, then we could go in here, reset the events, and they would be processed fine. Now in here they will probably fail again because they will run into the same exception. Now in here, this is the other app Jonas told you about, which counts up the airline bookings. And of course, we will now create a booking on the other side for Alitalia, and we will hopefully see that this number of bookings goes up. So I will create a new booking in here. This time for Alitalia, customer ID Johannes, booking state new. Let's save this. saved. And if we now go back in here and refresh it, you can see there are now 2 events in process. And you can see the second one, which we just had, is here with Alitalia AC. And if we go back, our Devtober consumed channel, it also failed. So maybe there is some issue with Jonas's consumption logic. All right, so this also failed, so I cannot show you, but this should have increased this counter. Okay, so that's it from my side on how to monitor it, and you could also now reset the event. I will hand back to Tatjana, who will give you a short overview on what's coming next.
Okay, thank you, Jens. So we have seen how you can build your own events, how you can trigger them and how you can consume them. And if your logic is, the custom logic in the event consumer is fine, it might also succeed. But so let's look into what we have provided to you and what will come next. So last year we have provided the frameworks around event provisioning and event consumption, what you have seen today. This year, the integration with the event broker will come for SAP to SAP use cases. You can also extend events which have been delivered by SAP. You can extend it with your own additional payload. You have seen the monitoring application for event queues. And what we have not shown today is that the event consumption can be also monitored through the application integration framework so that you can be notified in case of problems with your consumers. And the event consumption has also been enabled for the ABAP Git usage so that you can upload and download the generated consumers from one to another environment. In the S/4HANA On-Premise edition, we have added the integration with the advanced event mesh and also a capability for outbound communication to add filters so that you can control which event instances should be published or not, depending on what is inside the payload of the event. And the same capability for extensibility has been also added in the on-premise code line. Next year, we are planning to also add the advanced event mesh integration for the public cloud edition and also the filter capability there. In addition, we also plan to provide a dead letter queue so that you can control the failed events much better, that you can trigger the reprocessing and also the time it resides in the queue much more fine granular. If you're interested in how to start with event development, how to develop, how to configure, you will find various guides here for on-premise, for the cloud edition, and what to do in the BTP ABAP environment. And if you want to have some more guided tours through the development process, you can use our blogs and tutorials, which are listed here. So about how to start with the ABAP event-driven use cases. And
you're not sharing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I need to reshare. I thought that I've. Okay. Something is wrong with my. I'm sorry. Maybe one step back. So further information about development guides and configuration guides for the event consumption model you will find here for the S/4HANA Cloud BTP ABAP environment as well as on-premise. And if you want to have some more information about how to, or some more fine granular information and guided information about how to start with event-driven architectures and how to start with development of RAP event producers and event consumers. You can find tutorials and blogs here. I hope you have enjoyed the session with us, and we have equipped you with comprehensive information and valuable insights, and that you can start playing around with event-driven architectures if you haven't done yet. Thank you very much and have a good day.